Okay, so the next thing will be the legislators.
Hello.
What you got?
Come bearing gifts.
Don't all jump up at once, guys.
I guess so.
Does the committee have any questions for our reps? I mean, pending legislation?
Well, do you guys have anything you want to update us with first before we start? I mean, because if you may update some of the questions.
Well, at the request of your council, your school committee president, I have put a bill in to have Tiverton's share of the construction, the state funding for the construction increased from 30% to 40% starting 2013, fiscal 2013, which would be in 2012, to match what the other cities and towns will be getting as a this next fiscal year.
How many other cities and towns would that affect?
Any schools that are built after 2010 this year will be added into the 40% share from the state.
But how many would they need to go back sort of retroactively?
No.
No, I did not put the bill in retroactively.
Okay.
The bill would be from the date it starts with all the other schools. Tiverton's share would increase by 10%.
What happened was Jay was on the floor, they were voting on this, and I was texting him going, what about us, Jay? What about us? Because we're at 30, 33, which is one of the lowest by the wealth-based formula. And if they're going to move everyone else up to 40, we should be included. Because look at what Tiverton citizens did to support education. It was just amazing. And that would help the town. You know, it wouldn't hurt the state that much, you know. So Jay's going to do that for us. The other thing I wanted to say, Senator Felag and I were speaking about just the history of the property taxes, and we all went back to 1985, where it was the omnibus property tax relief bill that said the state was going to get 50, and the towns and cities were going to get 50. Then they amended it in '88, and it was going to be 60-40. We all remember that magic number. But then the banking crisis happened, everything else happened. Now, I know, Mr. Palmer, every time I call you, you say you're a data person. So I brought you the data. So general state aid in 05-06 was 4.8, and then it went to 5.1 and 5.1 at level funded. Remember that year? We thought we were going to get the 3%. Well, remembers. And we were all up there with Constantino, and he kept saying to us, don't think you're getting that 3%, you school community people, don't put it in your budget. And the governor had it in his budget. The General Assembly took it out. We were level funded, but we had some funds from different things we could make it. And then it went to 4.3 and 4. So here's how it's gone from the state. We see now 16%, and the rest from Tiverton. We just have a huge problem. Never mind 60-40. So Mr. Palmer, there's your data.
Thank you very much.
But to make that real, and also,
I mean, you look at that, and actually the picture even gets worse if the state aid formula gets adopted. As you know, there's been a dramatic shift in the amounts of money in the state aid formula, probably around a 3.6% shift between the urban communities and the suburban communities, where the suburban communities are going to be the losers, whereas the urban communities are going to be the so-called winners in the disbursement. And that's not counting Barrington, who has a tremendous increase in their state aid and is supposedly a suburban community. So any of the communities on this side of the bay lose out greatly. I represent the towns of Bristol, Warren, and Tiverton, and Bristol and Warren stand to lose, they say $8.5 million, but really from a mathematical perspective, it's like $47 million over a 10-year period, because once I take away that $858,000 the first year, I'm going to take out another $858 the second year. So it's not 850. When I go to that second year, it's really 850 times 2. In that third year, it's 850 times 3. Now, in the case of the town of Tiverton, I believe originally the bill came out, it was $1.5 million over a 6-year period, and we were able to make some changes to marginalize it over a 10-year period, and I believe $110,000 per year. But even still, that's something that's going to be dramatic effect on a community, especially if that community is a high-performing community, that now they have to make those changes to their budget. to actually hold to that. So we're working, just came from a meeting actually, Bristol and Warren had the commissioner over on one of her neighborhood tours, and she spoke to the students at 6 o'clock and now is speaking to the community at large regarding various issues on education.
And the other thing I know you're always faced with, I hear it when I'm out there, is the regionalization. So I just wanted to make a little chart of the things Tiverton's done to consolidate and share services, because I think that's the beginning of that. So here's the chart.
You know you guys like charts.
Absolutely.
Want us to hand it to them? So they can see it. They can see it. I don't think
Can
they're
they
not.
see it? You can't
I
see
can't
it.
see it from here, so
All right, let me show
I
you.
don't want the question because I said it.
One of the things in the funding fund we also looked at in the houses last time was to hold harmless all the cities and towns. And we figured with, including Central Falls and some of the larger towns that were hit, especially Bristol Warren, it's a $13 million ad per year to hold all the towns that actually were losers in the funding formula each year. If you take out Bristol Warren, all right, and Central Falls, the number dramatically decreases. But one of the things we will be looking at this time is to get some type of hold harmless building for most of the suburban communities.
But one of the issues you have to be quite honest with is the fact that the state closing the fiscal year 2010, as you know, the state runs their fiscal years on the same fiscal years that most of the communities do. So they start on July 1st and they end on June 30th. We ended the fiscal year of 2010 probably at about a $17 million surplus. The fiscal year that we're currently in, which is called FY11, is probably right about stable now. I mean, our revenues are higher than anticipated, but unfortunately some of our costs are a little bit higher. And that means our individual department heads from the executive branch have to look at tightening those particular budgets so those can actually come out balanced for the year. But the big challenge faces the General Assembly is the fact that in the FY12 budget, that would be starting next July 1st, which a lot of communities are looking for more funding in terms of educational aid or government aid, is the year that we lose out on federal stimulus money to the tune of $220 million on the Medicaid monies, and totaling other expenditures, it comes close to $300 million gap that has to be fixed. So there are a lot of issues and a lot of important decisions that have to be made during this budget process.
One of the things you're also going to see, the Senate President kicked off is a Senate Commission on Vocational Technical Schools. I'll be serving on that commission. Senator Gallo, who's head of the Senate Education Committee, will be the chair of that committee. And it's looking at, in the new funding formula, including Davies now, the money will follow the child. So it's going to go back and looking at the funding formula. So in the case of Tiverton participating in the Newport County Rogers, you may be paying less now than you were before. Who will that impact? So people are saying, well, how is that fair? Well, it's expected that the communities where the vocational technical school exists are gaining more money, and most of them do. Newport doesn't. If you look at most of the other ones where they are, they're gaining by the formula because they're in a suburban area, urban area, unlike Rogers. So how did that impact Newport? Remains to be seen. But the funding formula now changes. In the case of Davies, the Met School, etc., where the funding is going to follow the child back to the formula that was described last year, and then being modulated this year based on real data. So you'll see how that's. I don't know how many students Tiverton has that participated in Rogers vocational technical
About
school.
20 students fall part-time.
So that's potentially that cost will come down. Don't know for certain, but how does that impact Newport from a negative perspective? That'll have to be weighed as well.
And there's obviously, Sally, when you alluded to the 60-40, I don't know if other people understood what she was talking about, but that was in terms of contributions to the teachers' pension fund. When I was first elected 12 years ago, I was hoping to put in some way to make that distribution more of a 50-50 balance between the state and individual communities. And in hindsight, I wish they would have enacted that piece of legislation, because now as money gets tight, there's more apprehension towards making that particular split. But one thing that has to be noted here is the fact that in 2001, the overall contribution from the state and the communities was $84 million to the retirement fund. And that amounted to 12%, and then the teachers paid the 9.5% for 21%. Now that particular ratio in 2008 went from $84 million to $204 million contribution at a 60-40 split between the towns and the state. So that meant now that 12% that we were paying back in 2001 increased to 22%. And then we made some pension reform changes that stopped it for a little while, but unfortunately that $200 million figure is starting to grow again. That's projected at maybe $235 million this fiscal year. And things that you have to take into account when you're looking at that pension reform and pension issues is that, number one, you have people retiring at higher salaries. Number two, you have people living longer that are receiving those pensions. Three, you have a change in the ratio of those people receiving the pension to those people paying into the pension. And then fourth, you have unexpected returns on those pension monies. So there's a lot of factors that the legislature has to look at in terms of their overall budget and how they proceed in the future.
I'd just like to add regarding the pension, we got our bill for next year. And while last year we did receive a savings because of the adjustments that were made to the system, our increase is projected at 18%. So while this year, last year, the year we're in now, we got a benefit, but in order to make up for the benefit, it looks like it was just put out a year. So whatever savings districts did achieve, they're going to, unless we were special, worry about us, we're budgeting now, so, for it to go up 18%, it's quite a hit on our side, so just.
No, that's what I'm saying, because of those four factors and other things that come into play. It's always a moving target, and the actuaries have to do an annual study on it to provide what those projected amounts are going to be.
Have you guys heard of any non-financial issues? For instance, I know there's a big thing going on right now with bullying. There's a lot of commissions that are being held, a lot of meetings.
Senator Tassoni's.
Yep, Senator Tassoni's gonna.
I expect we'll see. I would think probably we'll see something coming from, I think, the Joint Commission, possibly Senate. I'm not certain. Clearly the Senate. I expect we'll see. I think it is. We'll see some legislation coming forward on that.
Legislation that will basically require a policy.
Uncertain what it's going to be.
Okay.
Right.
Have you heard that binding arbitration is going to rear its head again?
That I have heard.
Okay. So you just, how about getting rid of school committees? Is that?
Actually, consolidating.
I'm looking at your list.
Consolidating the teacher's contract with a single state contract, I've also heard.
That.